Hey, Troy, it's James West.
Hey, James. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Yourself?
Doing great.
Well, good. I loved seeing you the other night at the technology showcase we had. Thought the Petro.ai story is extremely unique, and I'm glad you're able to do a podcast with us today.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to share the message that we have going on here at Petro.ai.
Well, great. Well, for our listeners, welcome again to another edition of the Invest with James West podcast series. Other prior private company CEO podcasts we've had included Kinetic Pressure Control, Deep Imaging, FHE, Innovix, and several others. This is our 20th episode, and we're excited, of course, to host Dr. Troy Ruths of Petro.ai. And many of you probably recall, he was one of our guest speakers at our Private Energy Technology Conference back in November. For those of you who haven't heard of Petro.ai, it's an analytics delivery engine that allows customers to integrate disparate oil and gas data types, execute modern petroleum workflows, and collaborate with peers like never before. The Petro.ai platform amplifies oil and gas talent with next-generation technology. And Dr. Troy Ruths is the founder and CEO of Petro.ai. He received his BS in computer science from Washington University in St. Louis and a PhD in computer science with a specialization in computational biology from Rice University. He has over 9 years' experience in data analysis of oil and gas applications and has managed the development and deployment of upstream-focused data analysis and visualization tools in 6 countries, representing shale gas, conventional oil, heavy oil, onshore, and deep offshore. And he founded Petro.ai in 2013 as a conversion from his independent consulting practice. So again, Troy, welcome. Let's go ahead and jump into it.
Sounds great. And it's great to be the 20th episode. I think that's an auspicious number.
That certainly is, no doubt. So let's just jump into the business. So you describe your focus as aggregating disparate data sets together, providing a modern petroleum analytics solution. So for the benefits of our audience, and probably for myself too, can you break down further what that means and what's the market need that you're addressing?
So we want to change the way operators plan, develop, and operate their assets. And we actually work both in conventional, including deep water, and unconventional. But, unconventional has been a big focus. And when you think of an AI company, a lot of people think of it as the top of the pyramid. So, and that's reflected in a lot of the way AI is portrayed in movies, videos, things like that.
Sure.
The future is actually different. The future is actually going to be AI's at the bottom of the pyramid. So it's going to become the new backbone that serves information up to the enterprise, and humans are going to remain at that top of the pyramid. So when you think about what Petro.ai is delivering, it's sort of flipping the AI pyramid and making sure that all of the data is brought together and formed into information that can then be used in bundled workflows. So this is a huge pattern we see in a lot of other verticals, and it's exciting to be the leader in oil and gas and delivering it there. And so when you think about the AI world, there's sort of co-pilot and autopilot, and any AI platform is sort of a mix of both. So there's some things that happen on autopilot that you don't see, and then there's things that happen in co-pilot. And you can think of co-pilot as like the navigation system in your car that's suggesting you take a turn. But, there's lots of other conditions that you as the driver need to take into account before you do it. So Petro.ai does something very similar in the oil and gas world. We have a lot of autopilot algorithms and techniques that work at that bottom of the pyramid to serve information up to the humans who are making those decisions, and a rich co-pilot environment that actually walks these humans through pretty technical workflows.
Well, that's good to hear. I'm glad to hear that humans will be on top of the pyramid. So
that's right. We make sure of that as an apex predator.
Good, because the movies don't depict it that way. And
that's right.
AI scares me a little bit.
Well, it does, and I think people they're just not sure what it can actually accomplish and handle on its own.
Right.
And right now, you think a lot in databases and spreadsheets.
Right.
The data layer of the future is going to be way more intelligent than that, and that's a good way to think about how this is all going to change. Like your user, your casual engineer, they're not going to think about putting a database together or having to create a spreadsheet. Instead, they're going to be thinking about this information that's coming up in a much more contextual way, and that's what AI is going to hand to you.
Okay, I think that makes sense. So why is the unconventional development perfect, as I think we talked about at the showcase, for machine learning AI software tools?
Well, so AI and machine learning needs data. And in oil and gas, activity begets data. And there's been lots of activity in the unconventional world in the past decade.
Sure.
And so there's lots of data to mine. The other thing that's actually been really good over the past decade is all the experimentation that's occurred. So in multiple basins, in different benches, different completion methodologies and development plans. And so where there's variety, there's potential information. So what we can do is actually look at all the myriad of different approaches, landing zones, completion techniques, and take those patterns and project them forward. Now, where AI stubs its toe is it can really only extrapolate from what it's seen. And that can be a problem in a world where the solution may be outside of what we've actually tried in the past. And so that's where what we take approach is we actually mix in first principle geomechanics and petroleum engineering so that the AI is a little bit more intelligent than just looking at what's been done in the space.
Okay. All right, makes sense. So based on your run history so far, what are some of the key takeaways that you're seeing when it comes to really completion design and attempting to help the industry raise recovery factors?
So fundamentally, we need to change the way we think, value, and develop the unconventional reservoir.
Sure.
So the method du jour is to sort of find this optimal spacing, and that has been under scrutiny, both internally and externally, for a lot of operators. And at Petro.ai, and I think the whole industry, we've worked diligently to really understand the key productivity drivers in unconventionals, and I think we're really starting to see results here. And I think part of that is just changing the conversation to talk more about resource units, less about how many wells can you put in, what they're spacing, because there's different productivity drivers that change even within, let's say, the Delaware Basin. And those benches change as well. So when we take something like spacing, a wine rack pattern that's geometrically spaced with an exact spacing between each wells, that's decidedly suboptimal. And we've known this for a while, but the thing is we just haven't had the tools to figure out what that spacing should be given the certain drivers and what drivers to look for. So, I'm very optimistic on improving the recovery factors. And, what we did is we went back to what are the first principles at work. And when you think about it, the oil and gas industry went from fracking maybe 2% of the pay zones to 98% of the pay zone. It was a 9-day switch. And so the science of breaking rock and what occurs when you pressurize rock that's under a lot of stress is the field of geomechanics. And so what we did is we took this pretty esoteric field, like even petroleum engineers don't really take geomechanics. You get it in grad school maybe, and we're trying to take those principles, and what we've done is put together a nice workflow, an 8-step workflow that you can walk through, and it applies, systematic steps to understanding what are the key drivers for a particular resource unit, and then how many wells and what should the spacing be for those wells. Right. And so I think there's going to be dramatic effects and improvements with these new approaches.
Well, I certainly hope so. The industry definitely needs it. But operators have been somewhat protective over data in the past. How are you getting access to the data necessary to run these predictive kind of models?
Yeah, this is something I saw early on. So I've spent a long time in the space. I've worked with, super majors all the way down to small venture-backed operators. And, one thing is definitely true, that as an operator, you are developing the human-based knowledge of your asset, but then you're also generating a lot of data. And that data is proprietary information about that particular resource that helps them get a competitive advantage. Sure. So, when you think about an AI company, really an AI company is providing more value to that data. So it's not necessarily about the number of users, but more about the amount of data that you're actually increasing its worth and value. And so we saw that early on. And so what we do is we bring the platform to the customers. Okay. And there's lots of different ways to do that still support modern cloud deployment. So just because you're doing that doesn't mean you can't use cloud resources. What it does mean is we make a private sandbox space, whether that's inside the operator environment or a peered environment in the cloud, so that their data is never, ever mixed with other operator data.
I see. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So what are some of the best practices that you've captured from the customer base, and how do you think that steers future development?
So best practices that we've definitely seen is bundling workflows. And what that means is, as a completion engineer, you're actually going to want to look at a lot of different data types from that well life cycle in order to improve your design and decision making. So again, going back to the pyramid, humans are at the top of the pyramid. Mm-hmm. And if you're at the top of the pyramid, you should be fed.
Good.
Yeah, we're still there, and we're not going to get kicked off. But you need to be fed a lot of information. And what we see is the clients that really operate and outperform are the ones that are hungry for information, are hungry to get the full picture, the 360 view of what's happening both in the reservoir and at the surface. And so what we've seen is the customers that recognize the value of data, that recognize the role of digitization, both in terms of operational efficiency and asset development, definitely have a leg up. And that very much coincides with our Petro.ai vision.
Gotcha. And how does Petro.ai, or where do you obtain your data sources from? I know one of your sister kind of companies, Deep Imaging. I think you use some of their data that they capture. But what are the sources of the data that you're using? And then how much history of this data do you store?
Yeah, that's a great question, because once you start down this data path, it's a bit of a Pandora's box. Sure. Because there's lots of data and you can always keep collecting it. The short answer is Petro.ai stores a lot, and we are the industry leader in the number of data types and the size that we can store. So we hold over 60 different data types that cover reservoir completions, geo drilling, and production. And we store high-frequency data, so your 1-second pump curves and your 1-second rig data. We can even hold seismic traces and information, all the way to summary and diagnostic information, like deep imaging that you mentioned. And there's lots of other really amazing diagnostic data that we get when we complete an unconventional well that we don't store and we don't process. So deep imaging is one of them. There's not a home in an operator environment for electromagnetic fields.
Right.
There's not a home for microseismic data. There's not a home for fiber data. And so we can pull all these inside Petro.ai and use them as diagnostics for understanding, again, those key drivers for a particular resource unit.
Okay. And how many users do you currently have, or how broad is your customer base?
So Petro.ai delivers a tiered ecosystem, like most SaaS-based offerings today. And so in that ecosystem, we have 3,000 users and an install base of over 60 clients. About 1 in 4 rigs running in the U.S. is run by a Petro.ai customer. Wow. And, I'm really proud to say I think we have the best clients in the business. And there's been a lot of challenges, in the price environment. But, sure. Going back to what we see as these key drivers, companies that value data and value applying it have performed very well.
Right. Okay. Let's maybe hone in a little bit more on the technology. How competitive is this space, this software space? Who are the main competitors you come across, and can operators build out their capabilities internally?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because this space is heating up. There's lots of different software companies at varying sizes that are providing really good digital products in the ecosystem, and I think the buyers are getting smarter. They know how to sniff out what works and what doesn't work.
Right.
A couple of years ago, I would describe the digital landscape for oil and gas was sort of in this pilot hell, where everyone was getting pilots, but no one was getting purchases. Right. So we're past that. So we're in this space where buyers are committing. They are making digital strategies and employing them. When it comes to the competition, there's big companies, like Big Blue, that stepped out and said digital is the future. And I think everyone is realizing the role that digital needs to be in their portfolio. So it's more about understanding all the different components of that landscape and realizing where you fit in, because oil and gas is a big, complex vertical, and digital is going to be a huge part of the success going forward. I think part of that means that internal teams will have less a burden on building internally and more about taking these products and bringing the results together.
Right.
So it's going to be a flip, and we're already seeing in a lot of places operators really have honed in on the right size for an analytics team or a science team based on their revenue and their growth targets. And they don't want to be creating software.
Right.
They want to be integrating software. And they're actually really good at that, and they're really good at supporting software. And so, we've developed a lot of really good partnerships with our clients who want to build on in this digital journey, and Petro.ai is a key part of that.
Right. Okay. Well, I know that innovation and technology, and you know this too, the adoption it can be challenging in the oil patch. So, how quickly do you see customers changing their either workflows or completion designs based on the data that you're providing or generated for Petro.ai? And then, what are some of the impediments to change that you've run across?
So, I've been in the industry for a while. I think if I could make a chart, I would correlate ability to adopt new technologies and oil price.
Okay.
And the better the oil price is, the harder it is to get technology adoption.
Right.
And, in large part, this is a risk-adverse industry for a lot of good reasons.
Sure.
And when it comes to technology, you really only want to adopt when you have to. So when it comes to us, I think the biggest impediment is a good oil price that keeps people just sort of happy where they are.
Right.
The environment is great for innovation right now, and I think that's the first impediment that we sort of knocked down.
Mm-hmm.
The other is training. So a lot of these users, this is new stuff, and going back to the perception of AI and digital, they see it as competing for their job.
Right.
So one of the most important things we need to do is show them that we are at the bottom of the pyramid. Like we are the new janitors of the digital space, and we're really their best friends. So a lot of it is education, I think, in order for adoption.
Gotcha.
And at Petro.ai, we've really done a good job with that, and I think there's a lot of other good digital companies in this space that have delivered on that as well.
Right. Right. So, one of the biggest issues the industry has faced and has caused a lot of the spacing problems is frac hits. And how is Petro.ai being used to mitigate frac hits and therefore optimize drilling and completion programs?
This is a huge problem, and this has been a huge focus at Petro.ai because fundamentally we need to deliver on some of the core challenges that these operators are experiencing. So the first is we've rebuilt our complete methodology in oil and gas around geomechanics for these unconventional plays. And what that means is we've built tools for understanding and characterizing the drivers for frac growth and frac geometry, which leads to better understanding of when you'll have a frac hit, when it will be bad, when it will be neutral, and when it will be good. Mm-hmm. And that also means modeling the effect of depletion with that in situ stress environment. So what we do, our unique approach, is we build a complex system approach. And so you said in my bio, actually, I did my PhD in computational biology. So my specialty is actually in complex system modeling. Mm-hmm. And so you can think about that. It's actually what's used a lot to model stock markets. When you have lots of actors and you have lots of uncertainties, but you have some observations, what you want to do is model a complex system. And you don't want that complex system model to be overly complex, and you don't want it to be too simple. So there's a sweet spot there. And that's informed by the fundamental processes at work. So we've built a really nice complex system model that bridges the gap between geomechanics and machine learning in order to scale up to the activity level that operators have.
Right.
And, the application of these things, there's a lot of low-hanging fruit here. So I just want to give you one example.
Sure.
In drilling, companies are typically looking for faster ROPs. So they want to complete that well as quickly as possible and move on to the next one. So if you're drilling in a zone, you're going to drill faster through softer rock than harder rock, brittle rock.
Right.
Well, when you go back to complete that well, you actually don't want to complete in soft rock. You want to break brittle rock.
Right.
You're actually going to get better fracs there. So right away, if you don't take a holistic view, then you're putting wells in ductile or softer rock that then you won't have better completion optimization on. And so I think this one of my goals is to move away from this factory-driven model and more of this holistic resource view. because that's where we're going to get a lot of optimization.
Okay, great. How can this software platform improve the collaboration between the company's data science teams and the operating teams?
Definitely. And I think going back to that pyramid analogy, we're here to support decision makers, looking at data in context, annotating on it, notifying it. So actually, Petro.ai has a really strong social backbone to it. And any data that we load into the system, users can comment on, they can share. And that's a big part of allowing customers to build their own workflows to match their business processes. So, again, going back to this bundled workflow approach, users really just want to be able to jump into this world of data, comment on it, move between it, share context. It's a lot like the experience you have browsing Amazon, right? So you can see what other people bought. It can suggest to you what you should purchase. And Petro.ai takes that same spirit and puts it within oil and gas where, as a reservoir engineer, you may want to look at completion files and comment on it or ask someone something about it. And when you think about that data science team in a company is supporting those people. So they are the new layer that then can learn from all of these technical experts. So, a digital collaborative space is vital, and that's what Petro.ai delivers on, again, is that bottom of the pyramid approach to support who's on top.
Okay. So you mentioned this part of the industry is getting hot, so a lot of software targeting upstream analytics applications. How do you guys drive differentiation with Petro.ai?
A lot of the new software that has entered the space is focused on operational efficiency and labor. So those are nice things to focus on because they're spending money right now on them, and they're a big spend. But honestly, those aren't going to be needle-moving enough for the industry. So we're focused on the needle-moving problem, which is how can we re-engineer? We need to re-engineer how we approach these unconventional assets, and it's a value engineering problem. So we really separate ourselves out by believing that good office engineering is going to be what actually drives differences. And you don't need to go too far to realize that that's the case. So for instance, if you have a pad and you think you can develop it with 9, but by using Petro.ai and our workflows, you see that you actually get the same productivity with 7, you're at a 20% improvement, right? Plus 20% improvement in cost. Further, if you have a completion design and you see that you can actually cut back that completion design to a low-intensity design for at least half of your pad, you've now saved a significant amount on completion costs. So there's a lot of companies out there that are focusing on real-time, quick operational improvements. But I think the thing that's going to save the oil and gas industry is just better re-engineering of how we actually develop these assets.
Makes sense to me. So let's a couple parting thoughts here. How as we as investors or analysts just following Petro.ai know that you're operating or executing on your milestones? What are the key milestones for next year and for 2021, and how do we know that you're going to be on track?
We would love to be part of the change for how we re-engineer and develop these unconventional reservoirs. And, I'd love for Petro.ai to be part of that successful turnaround of the shale industry. And I want our clients to be the ones that deliver good fiscal discipline and returns to their investor cash while still optimizing their resource. So we are bought into the fact that these companies need to actually be producing profitably. And I think we can, and I want to be part of that. Tangibly, for Petro.ai, we're looking at market adoption. To be at the bottom of the pyramid, we are a market adoption play. We need to get more clients and more data into the platform.
Right. Okay, so I'm going to ask you to do my job for me. What's your call on energy for 2020?
Yeah, so I think a lot smarter people than me have looked at this a long time. I think it's going to be a bifurcation year. When you think about wine, in the wine world, the best vintages come from the years of great stress, drought, and what you end up with is, the best tasting wine that has absorbed that stress because it's refined the product. And I think, for 2020, it's going to be a vintage year.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean it's going to be a great year, but I do think it will be a vintage year. And I think there's lots of things that we're seeing. There's going to be bifurcation in the companies that can deliver and can't deliver, because I think the price environment is going to, on the whole, stay sort of fixed. It may go up and down, but stay sort of fixed. I think the Permian is harder than we think it is. There was the Permian premium, and now that they're in, there's a lot of stuff wrong with the house that we got to figure out. So I think, if anything, for Permian operators to really deliver, they need to really deliver on the engineering side. This is a complex basin with lots of stacked pay, not a lot of frac barriers, which means you got to know what you're doing before you come in with a sledgehammer. Yep. And to me, what that means is digital is going to have a good year. I think operators are going to see that there's a lot of value in their data. They've refined and improved their approaches a lot. They've learned a significant amount, and we're going to move towards surgical development. We're going to go away from factory drilling and go more to surgical.
Certainly a somewhat controversial comment there. I hope you're right. I think we need to see that happen, but we'll see how the industry does evolve. It's got to evolve, no doubt about that. So we have to have evolution, but we'll see how fast. So last one for me. What do investors, market observers, myself, what do we not realize about Petro.ai or the broader AI space in the oil and gas area that you operate in?
Yeah, I think two things, James. The first is we get to work with lots of operators, and we work a lot at the development level. They're still right-sizing and learning from this huge influx of capital that they got in the past decade.
Right.
I personally don't think it should scare investors away from the resource. The resource is good. It's there. The development that we have done hasn't destroyed it. And, this resource can be economically developed with great returns.
Sure.
And I do think the digital landscape is going to be vital for that turnaround. So I think that's the first thing. The second thing is AI right now, people think of it, again, as this top of the pyramid thing.
Right.
And it's not going to last there. It's actually going to be at the bottom. And the companies like Petro.ai that serve the bottom are the ones that are going to be successful, I think. I think the ones that serve the top, you can easily get lopped off. If you serve the bottom, no one's cutting off the bottom of the pyramid.
Right. Fair enough.
So I do think AI companies, it's a fight for the bottom, to be honest. Like you want to be the layer that people build on. And if you're at the top serving high-level black box solutions, you're going to be the first one that's going to be let go when any times are tight, right? So I think that's going to be a big change in the way people think of AI and how it fits into the future.
Well, no doubt, it's already changed my thinking of AI, and I'm just glad you told me that humans are still on top. So I'm no longer as scared as I was 30 minutes ago. Which, Troy, good to catch up today. Always good to catch up, and great to have you at the Technology Showcase. And we'll be looking forward to the advancement of Petro.ai going forward.
It's been a pleasure, James. Thanks for having me on the podcast. These are always fantastic, and I look forward to staying in touch as we move this forward.
Sounds great. All right, Troy, take care.
Thanks. Bye.